I know Paula as my dependable sister. Every time I call her, she's like, okay, what we doing? She's always a little been a supportive partner and confidant, and I'm really grateful for her leadership and her co-creation of this dynamic panel. I do want to shout out Zoe, my program manager, who has also been an integral part of putting this panel together today. Um, I'm not going to hold the mic any longer. I'm going to pass it over to Paula so that she can introduce our dynamic panel. And I want to thank everyone for being here and just say, let's make this a great event. So, Paula.
Wow, thank you so much, Summer. Yes, chicken and waffles, the breakfast of champions. Woo! So I just want to say happy Women's History Month to you all and let you know that I am so excited to facilitate what I know will be a very insightful conversation with our panelists about the field of corporate social responsibility, or CSR. But before we dive in, I actually want to hear from you all about what you think corporate social responsibility entails. So I'm going to step back and pause just a little bit and invite you to drop a word or two into the chat of what comes to mind when you think about corporate social responsibility. All right, so I see them coming in. All right, get those juices going. Okay. Yes, community engagement. Hey, Maisha. Yeah, volunteering, thoughtful investments. I love that, Maria. Thank you. Yes, yes, that centers voices for the community. Awesome. Yes, community engagement. Yeah, social change and sustainable communities. Yes. So yes, yes, yes to all of what you've put into the chat. And for the purpose of our conversation today, I'd like to offer us a working definition that says that corporate social responsibility is a business model where companies try to go beyond compliance and really seek to actively improve not just the society, but also the environment. And they often do this through either philanthropy, so grant making, community engagement, and of course, sustainable business practices. So why are we even talking about this topic as a field? Well, in her article titled The State of CSR, it's quite white actually. Gloria Johns cited a 22 study that found that the field was not as diverse as it should be. In fact, the study reported that 60% of the respondents said that they had fewer than 25% Black, Indigenous, and people of color working on their teams. 57% of these respondents reported having no teammates who were from the communities that their CSR program sought to serve. So, as you can imagine, when we saw this stats, the Black Funders Network said, this is something that's right up our alley, and it's very much in line with our mission to do something about. Let's go ahead and pull together a group of phenomenal women who we know have successfully navigated this career space and convene a conversation around this topic. It's our hope that after this session today, you will learn about these phenomenal Black women and how they are leading and making an impact in this field, that your awareness about the types of roles that these fields contain and the path to navigating to them will increase, particularly if it's something that you're interested in looking into. And last but not least, if you happen to already be working in this field, it's my hope that it will cause you to reflect, and I will include that myself in that as well. But it's my hope that it will cause you to reflect on what we might do to help increase diversity in this field. So with that, I'd like to now shift to introducing our phenomenal panel. And I'm going to first just say their names and where they're from, and then we'll invite them to bring their voice into the conversation. So first, we have Deidra Parrish Williams, and Deidra is from Trane Technologies. There she serves as the Director of Corporate Citizenship and Community Affairs, and she's also the Executive Director for their foundation. I'm also honored to welcome Jacqueline Hood, who is the Purpose and Sustainability Manager and Initiatives Lead. She's the Purpose and Sustainability Manager at Crow LLP. We also have Jamira Burley, who is the Worldwide Education Strategic Initiatives Lead at Apple. Welcome, Jamira. Additionally, we have Karmen Kurtz, who is a Senior Manager of Strategy and Operations at Airbnb. And last but certainly not least is my colleague and friend, Ola Jimoh, who I have the pleasure of working with. And Ola is our Social Impact Senior Specialist at Blue Shield of California. So welcome, ladies. Thank you all again for answering my phone call and not letting me go to voicemail when I reached out to you. Really appreciate it. I have to give a special shout out to Deidra and Jacqueline because it had been a while since we spoke. And so I just really appreciate that you all answered the call. So I'm going to start with you, Deidra. I'm going to start with you, Karmen. Can you tell us how you describe your job to your family when you're at Thanksgiving dinner table, and what you like about doing social good work in the corporate context?
Sure. I don't know if I am good at this because my family has no idea what I do. I've told them for many Thanksgivings, but I will definitely give it a try. I'm honored to be here. Again, my name is Karmen Kurtz. I work actually for Airbnb.org, and we are a 501c3. We help connect people to free temporary housing after natural disasters and humanitarian crisis. So that's my one line about what my org does. And my role specifically is that I help design operating models or operational strategies, and work with our tech teams to build products that are specifically tailored to our partners and our guests that access that housing. The second question was, what do I like most about my role? I think what I like most is how much I've been able to evolve it. So when I started my career, I was in nonprofits. And when I moved into this role, I was doing some like grant making strategy and implementation. And I kind of was like, I think I want more. And I was able to really grow in the product space and just in other ways that I did not even know myself I could do, but I was able to really see a beautiful evolution in this role because of how much corporate social responsibility changes year over year.
Thank you. Thank you for that. So Deidra, I'd like to hear from you. Tell us just a little bit about what you do in your day job, but also I'm wondering what you think is most challenging about doing social good work in the corporate context, and what have you done to address those challenges?
That's a very loaded question. And by the way, I was delighted to take your call and to be invited to be in this room. I wish there had been rooms like this when I was earlier in my career trying to find my way. I feel like I had to blaze a path on my own. But in any case, what I do day to day can really change because in addition to the philanthropic work that we do from our foundation, we run programs and things fall out of the sky all the time. So days can be a little unpredictable, but I don't mind that at all. I think for this group, what we do is probably fairly commonplace in that we run. Certainly, volunteerism is probably the easiest and most relatable category of work. We've got our programming around that incentivizes people to volunteer. We've got our employee relief fund. Most of our work, though, is in the space of developing meaningful partnerships with the organizations that are helping us to activate our strategy. Um, it is one of the things that I find particularly challenging, and maybe it's just because of the way I'm wired, is that although I think corporate responsibility has evolved over the years, the last 20 or so years, and it's gained, I think, a little more credibility within the ESG model, I think there's still work to be done to help people across the organization in more traditional spaces to understand the value proposition and the criticality of it, right? That it is a part of establishing brand health, it's a part of building a strong employee pipeline. It can be a differentiator in our go-to-market strategy. So I feel like I am constantly trying to find ways to insert our value prop into the different parts of our business. And one of the things that I've done, which is what you asked, is I've really been assertive about a number of things. It's almost like I'm running a campaign, you know, a corporate responsibility campaign within the organization. So there are some key messages that I try to make sure I have the opportunity to pour into our business in lots of different ways, right? So from, you know, fighting to be on the agenda at our global leadership forum to make sure that that's part of the corporate speak, right? Is understanding that that is a critical part of the foundation of our culture. And not just talking about volunteerism and doing things for goodness sake, but helping people understand that shared value model, that corporate citizenship is a necessary component of a healthy society. So any company that's looking at sustainability and claims to be a company that's focused on sustainability has to also embrace corporate responsibility, because societies rely upon the investment of corporations. Corporations need healthy society. So it's, you know, there's a relationship there that has to be actively maintained.
I love that. So it's symbiotic relationship, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Thank you. So I'm going to toss it to you next, Jacqueline. Also want to hear from you about how you explain your job to your family and friends. But additionally, I would love to hear your thoughts on what you think are some of the unique advantages or disadvantages that you bring to the role as a Black woman.
Yeah, well, how I would explain my role to my family is that, and it is a trick question. It's hard to explain to them sometimes, but if I could simply explain it to them, I would tell them that I'm basically focused on our employee engagement and our community engagement. I'm looking every single day to figure out how do we keep our employees engaged, but also stay committed and true to our local communities. So my role, I work for a purpose and sustainability team, but I'm always looking for ways to make a big impact on our employees, but also to our community. I'm making sure that people are going to be able to empower the places where they live, work, and play every single day. Because that means a big deal to people and when they decide where they want to work and if working is a good fit there. But I would also say that I also try to make sure people understand that this is more than just a feel good thing that we're doing when it comes to corporate social responsibility. It also means dollars to the business, right? So I try to always get them to understand that we're not just doing this just to feel good. We're doing this because it matters to the communities and it matters to our business. But if I could talk a little bit about disadvantages and advantages, it's kind of funny because I feel that the disadvantage is also an advantage, right? So the disadvantage is really most of the times you may be the only one that looks like you sitting at the table. And it could be a little bit uncomfortable at times. However, that feeling of being uncomfortable can also be an advantage. And I say that because of a book that kind of opened my eyes. Her name is Leah Thomas, and the book is called Intersectional Environmentalist. And that book helped me realize my superpower in this realm of work that we do, because what it helps us to see is that when you're sitting at that table, most of the people around you don't look like you or come from the communities that they are trying to impact. However, you have a unique voice to speak for those communities where we're trying to make an impact. And sometimes they're going to be looking for you to help or be courageous, to speak up, to say something. So I sometimes try to channel that disadvantage to be my advantage.
Great, thank you for sharing on that. I appreciate that, Jacqueline. So, Ola, I know that you actually have lived in both spaces. You've lived in the foundation world and you've lived now in the corporate world. And I'd just like to hear from you, what you think about how the work is either similar or different in terms of the traditional philanthropic giving as opposed to sort of corporate philanthropic giving.
Yes, thank you for the question, of course, and for being here. Wanted to share that Pearls of Wisdom was my first program with BFN. So this is a full circle moment and really excited and honored to be with you all today. So in terms of similarities and differences, there's been definitely plenty that I can lean on, but leaning on the similarities, I think with a lot of the work that we're doing, both on corporate side and at the foundation, there's essentially a North Star that all of our teams are working towards. So very obvious, but there's a mission that folks are behind and working towards changing and shaping that environment. I think on the similarities front, if we're thinking more on a technical side, both of these groups and industries, you have some accountabilities and have some agreement in place. At my time at the San Francisco Foundation, we really leaned on having a really collaborative grant making process. And I think that still shows up here at my time at Blue Shield of California, where we're working constantly with our nonprofit partners to make sure deliverables or any items that we're agreeing on feels good and that the investment is going towards a larger project that will make the change that a group of people or the nonprofit wants to serve. As we lean into differences, I think one of the biggest things that I notice in the corporate space is the reality of the fluctuation, especially as it relates to budgeting. A lot of us, I can imagine in this room, can attest to just the different aspects and hits with the economy. And I think in the corporate philanthropy side, that tends to affect our work a little bit differently, just due to the fact that the budget is conducive to how exactly we can make investments or how exactly we can make impact in the communities. From my experience at the San Francisco Foundation, our budgets were still fluctuating, but a little more baked in. So I think we were able to be strategic in the sense of having set and concrete planning for many years to come, because we know we have the endowment or different ways that we can lean on certain dollars. As it relates to differences as well, I think on the nonprofit side, you are on the field a little bit more. In my role at the San Francisco Foundation, I was able to be a part of community conversations as it relates to what we're doing well, what they wanted to see differently. And I think that also consisted and related back to that collaborative feel. And while we're still collaborative here at the Blue Shield of California and on the corporate side, I feel that shows up differently because we rely and trust the nonprofit partners that we're investing in to kind of take our money, run with what they think is working well, and then report back to us, whether in a formal manner or informally. So I feel that has allowed me to kind of learn more about leaning into that trust-based philanthropy model, to know that when we're in this corporate setting, we are working with these nonprofits because we trust that they are going to roll up into our goals, of course, but also because they're going to make the difference that we want to have essentially within our orgs, or just in general as we look at social impact and the social change that we want to serve. And here at Blue Shield of California, one of my bodies of work is working very closely with our Blue Sky initiative, which is focused on enhancing mental health for youth in California. So a lot of the partners that I get the pleasure of working with are really working towards changing and shaping that space. And I think going back to that trust-based practice, we're able to really lean on them as the experts and continuously learn to them around how we can just make the change that we want to serve, while also still hitting our business goals and the impact that we have related to our CEO and the board that we report to.
Great, thank you, Ola. And thanks also for giving us a glimpse into what your day looks like here at Blue Shield. I'd like to ask you the next question, Jamira. I'm thinking back about the article where it talks about the field not being as diverse as it could be. And I just want to hear from you, what have you done to sustain yourself in the space where you're often the only one, as Jacqueline referenced?
That is a great question, and I'll echo everyone else and say it is a pleasure to be here and to almost close out Women's History Month with this discussion, especially as we recognize the importance of social impact, as much of our government and around the country is on fire, and the importance of social impact and philanthropy becomes even more important to protecting the well-being and safety of our communities. You know, as someone who has been in the social impact space for a very long time, early in my career, accidentally, I think one of the things that I've always kind of pride myself on in order to sustain myself is, one, remembering why I'm doing this work, recognizing that I come from the communities that are deeply impacted, that are oftentimes the target or the aspirational goal for many of these social impact portfolios. So I have a unique understanding of the lived experiences of those communities. And I'm also constantly reminded by the fact that you know, at any moment that I don't need to be here. I'm one of those people that I will get up and go the moment that I feel like a opportunity or a space that I am in is not only not welcoming, but also detrimental to the communities that I'm trying to protect. You know, if you coming from the communities that you live in and are trying to advocate on behalf of them, what many people don't tell you is that you are just as beneficial to the organizations or company as the company is to you. You give them legitimacy because you come from those communities, but at the same time, if those companies do not do right by your communities, you're the only one that has to go back and explain yourself. And so for me, I've always lived with a level of integrity of, you know, protecting myself within the space by finding my crew, being able to hone in on the project that I think are extremely important. But the moment that I feel like I'm not able to show up as my authentic self and representation of my community, I will go. I've never been afraid to get up and go, and I think that has enabled me to protect myself, but also protect the ones that I care about the most.
Yeah, and can you say a little bit about what your day-to-day looks like?
Yeah, I'm happy you didn't ask me to explain how I explain my job because, you know, as one of 16, I'm still convinced that my mom thinks I work for the mayor of Philadelphia, which has not been the case since 2014. But yeah, so I work at Apple. I lead worldwide strategic initiatives around our global education work. So my job is to build, maintain, and develop relationships with multilateral organizations, multilateral stakeholders. So ministers of education, teachers unions, parent groups, institutions like the UN, the World Bank, UNICEF, to one, identify priorities, look for opportunities for collaboration, but also to ensure that our products and services are showing up in the classrooms that are better suited to enhance student achievement. And so I get the opportunity to kind of work with a wide range of different communities, understand their needs and the needs and the resource that they need to move their communities forward. The problem that you will always find is that not everyone needs overlap with each other, and depending on who holds the purse strings really help to define the priorities, which also oftentimes can be in conflict with the needs of the community.
Yeah, I hear that. And I saw a lot of my panelists nodding their heads about that. So I want to invite you to chime in on that. Actually, Deidra, I'm looking at you because I know you have navigated this space for quite a long time. And so just wondering what your thoughts are about that. And also, you know, what have you found to be the most helpful skills in your leadership in this space, Deidra? Oh, you're on mute. You're on mute.
I was, I don't know if smiling is the right word. It wasn't exactly a joyful emotion I was having, thinking back to moments in time where, just as Jamira described, there are times where you can feel out of sync with the attitudes or the behaviors of your employer. And there's no question that as a CSR or corporate responsibility leader, you can at times be the face of the organization to a specific community. Often as Brown people, those are communities where, as you said so well, there's an expectation of credibility because you are of that community. So if I show up in a certain part of New York where I'm from, people think, well, your employer is okay because we think you're okay. And that's a burden, right? It can be a burden when there's a disconnect. But what I would say too is that obviously everybody has to manage those experiences in ways that feel that they're honoring, you know, themselves. But I also think that those moments are teachable moments and moments where there's opportunity for you to exercise the unique perspective that you have as a member of that community to help corporations understand when there are missteps. That's to me one of the unique values of sitting in the seat I sit in. I am fully aware that there have been times where, and let's be candid, employment is a contract, it's an exchange. I've got to bring value in order for me to, you know, earn the reward of sitting in the seat. And part of the value I know at times is that I am a person of brown skin that lets them check a box, that lets them demonstrate a commitment, whether to women or to people of color. But in exchange, part of the deal for me is that I now have a voice and I now have a platform on which to stand to talk to you about what those investments should look like. So it hasn't always been an ideal marriage. It has not. But I feel a real commitment to the communities where there are people that look like me. And I'm really proud that over the course of my career, and it's spanned different industries. I've been in the public sector, I've been in the private sector. I've run a healthcare foundation. Now I'm back in corporate philanthropy. I have directed millions of dollars that would not have ended up in communities where there are Black and brown people. I remember many years ago being part of an organization that was much earlier in their corporate responsibility journey. And it was that brand of CR where it was sort of the president's wives' pet projects. And a lot of money was going into garden clubs and symphonies and things like that. And, you know, the community was very happy to receive those dollars, but I had to make a case about, you know, shifting winds and what that's doing to our brand. It happened to happen at a time when there was a huge scandal that befell this organization. So it was a perfect moment in time for us to be thinking about our brand and how we were received. But it was a turning point, and I was really proud to be able to redirect those dollars into Black and brown communities. So I guess what I would say in short is being determined, being nimble, being ferocious, being strategic.
Thank you for that. Thank you. So Karmen, I'd like to come back to you, and I'm wondering for you, how did you, because you talked about the evolving nature of CSR, I'm wondering how you came to be in the field and, you know, what has been your path?
Yes. So starting from the start, I'm from Raleigh, North Carolina. And when I was in college, I had no idea what I wanted to do. I just knew that I wanted to feel good about what I'd spent most of my life doing. And so I landed on public health. So I actually was working in nonprofits, specific to the public health sector. And I wanted to move. So I was just applying for any public health jobs anywhere in the world. And by some miracle, I got a job in Oakland, California. That was my first time going to California. I moved, I didn't know anybody. I just had myself in the car and left. So I landed at this organization called Prevention Institute in Oakland. And I loved working there, loved learning about the Bay Area, but also was kind of like, I worked 2 jobs. I didn't know the cost of living was like this. You know, I'm from North Carolina. I didn't know it was gonna be like
You should
this.
have called me. I could have told you.
So in the midst of working 2 jobs, I also was meeting people in the Bay Area and learning about Silicon Valley, which was for me and where I'm from, the concept of Silicon Valley, I did not know about. I did not know that you could work for an app. So I didn't even like, there was just a whole new world that I got brought into by being in a different part of the country and being exposed to different people. So in that exploration process, I started to hear about social impact and started to learn about this world at the intersection of social good and technology. And I found this role at Airbnb.org where they were in a place where they had a team full of tech people, but nobody knew nonprofits, and they wanted to be able to give grants to nonprofits to connect people to housing. But they were like, we need to figure out how we actually do this. How do we actually operationalize this? And that was my big value. That was my entry point, was saying, I know nonprofits, I know how to get shit done. And I want to help. I believe in this mission and I want to help. And I was able to get in the door. So I started as somebody who was building operations, building grant making strategy and implementing that strategy. And then I started to learn, or maybe feel, that my nonprofit experience wasn't quite enough. Like I needed more. So I started to expand. And like, one thing about me is I'm gonna get after it. I think Deidra said like ferocious, like a ferocity. I definitely had that hunger when I started Airbnb, and I have learned like SQL, I've learned product management, I've learned UX design. I just learned things so that I could leave the grant making space and start to figure out how to evolve that and make it make sense in this tech
Yeah.
universe.
Okay, that's incredibly helpful insight. And I want to just pause a moment and invite folks. We are going to save some time before we wrap up for Q&A. So if you're percolating on some questions, feel free to drop them in the chat, and we will definitely get to those. So I'd like to come back to you, Jacqueline. I'm wondering if you have some thoughts about like what has really helped you in your leadership in this space. Yeah, so and if you feel free to comment on any of the other things that the other panelists said, because I also saw you vigorously nodding as some of the points were being made.
Yeah, I mean, because I think although we come from different backgrounds and work for different companies, it's almost the same story that you hear consistently across the board. And for me, I think that is something that has really helped me in my career, is finding my tribe, right? And so while you're out there, and sometimes it's hard to navigate, to learn, the world of CSR is so big. There's so many different avenues that you can go to. And I'm a very passionate person. I love people and I love giving back. And to marry those two is something special. But along the way, passion is not going to get you far, right? It'll keep you there, but it's not going to get you far. But what gets you far is that networking, is that finding your tribe, finding the people where you want to be, and kind of networking with them, finding out what did they do, how did they get there, and navigating your way. And your tribe could look different from my tribe. I don't know what your tribe could be. It could be, or you could have different tribes. But whatever it is, I think that's one of the biggest things outside of getting these different certifications, in the different types of education, because it's when you talk about education in the ESG or CSR field, those type of degrees are just now coming about. They didn't exist when a lot of us got into this work. It just didn't. But now there's different certifications and everything that you can go get. But I would say to get laser focused on what field of CSR really sings to you. What are you passionate about? And then start to focus on those certifications or the education that you need behind there. But maintain that tribe. So Paula, when you reached out to me, and I could say me, you, and Deidra, when we were at the seminar that we did together, the class with BCCC, immediately there was this connection and the related stories. And those are the type of people, because we had an immediate connection and we built those relationships, we were able to circle back with each other. And of course, I remembered you right away, Paula. And of course, I remembered Deidra. So those are the things sometimes that help me to keep going in this field, is making sure that I find those connections in my tribe.
Yeah, thank you. And thank you for that, Jacqueline. Yes, because you all, I did say, I hope you remember me, but because I'm calling to ask you for something. So again, I'm glad that you did. And I want to kind of unpeel something that you said about the field of CSR and finding, what drives you, because I'm not sure everyone on the call would know what ESG is or the different avenues. So I'm going to ask you, Jacqueline, if you could maybe just start with the ESG part, and I'll invite the other panelists to chime in about different areas within CSR that folks could consider. So if you could unpack, like what is the E and the S and the G stand for, and what does it entail?
Absolutely. So ESG stands for environmental and social governance. And really, when you look at it, it's almost looking like a big wheel of the different things that a company does to stay true to itself, to show up in the community the right way. So there's all these different spokes when it comes to ESG. So there's the environmental piece where companies that either are producing a service or producing products are responsible for when it comes to the environment. And then there's the social aspect of it, the community relations part of it. And then there's governance. What are the laws and regulations that are constantly changing that these different companies are trying to keep up with? And so within ESG itself, there's so many different avenues that you could focus on to explore a career inside of ESG. So that's the quick spiel of what ESG is.
And Ola, I know that you and on our team straddle both the S and also some of the community engagement piece, just through your liaisoning with employee volunteering and giving. Could you talk a little bit about that?
Yes, happy to, and want to share a little bit of context as well for me and how that fits in, especially with the S of ESG. So I grew up in LA, Los Angeles, particularly a small town called Bellflower, 562 in particular, if anybody on the call is from there.
Shout out to the 562.
And my neighborhood was predominantly Black and Hispanic. That's what I was familiar with. That's what I grew up with. And I attended the University of California, Irvine, in California, which was in Orange County, which was a complete 360 for where I grew up. And if you're familiar with Orange County, it's a predominantly white, wealthy area. And I always tell folks when I moved there, that's when I really realized I was Black. I was like, oh, okay, like I'm Black, this is my Blackness and how it shows up. So I share that context because I feel that definitely relates to my drive and passion being in this space. When I was in Irvine and got to see the differences between those communities and what I grew up with, that's when I really learned about the several disparities that were taking place and the very large gap of opportunities that was existing in my childhood, and then for the folks that look like me. So that really drove my area and interest to wanting to work in community. And fast forward to now, I'm thankful I'm able to do that. So to what Paula mentioned, I feel my work really centers around that S of the ESG when we look at social. And as Jacqueline mentioned, that's really thinking about the community engagement front and really thinking about how we can look at communities as integral business drivers and how they're actually helping our larger goals and larger business needs. And in that aspect, within our team, we have several different kind of subgroups that fit into that. So we have a separate employee engagement and volunteerism group. It's a mighty team of two who's really leading the charge around how to gather our employees at Blue Shield of California to volunteer and go out and do work within the communities that we occupy. And for Blue Shield in particular, we are a statewide company, so we have employees all over. And the beauty of that is we really get to think about all the different nonprofits that are really doing a lot of great work, again, in the communities that our employees exist in, or in communities that employees have larger connections towards. So that's definitely an avenue of focus for folks that are interested in kind of helping businesses think about how to actually get people out and engage. And again, that's anything from, more in-person, physical volunteering, even skill volunteering, being able to use all your knowledge and expertise and help a nonprofit advance their mission or goal as a part of that. And also, this was mentioned earlier, we're thinking about sustainability and especially that E and ESG. We also have a sustainability team that really focuses on a lot of different aspects. That if we're thinking about the social side, how exactly environmental justice is affecting our communities again that we are serving, and also how that relates back to larger sustainability goals at hand. So there's a lot of great intersections entwined and intersections when we think about just exactly how the people power is leading a lot of our work and how we are essentially helping different communities accomplish a certain challenge, or also just think about the conditionings that they were experiencing in where they live and how that affects their day-to-day. So I think there's a lot of great ways to use your passion towards a larger good and then also still have that exchange with the business as well.
Great. Thank you, Ola. Yeah. And then Jamira, I'm just wondering from you, like, what have you found the most helpful in your leadership? And, what would you advise someone if they were thinking about pursuing careers in this area?
Run. No, I wouldn't say that. I wouldn't say that. I would say, I think a lot of people someone mentioned it earlier, that it's such an emerging space now, and so many people are interested in getting involved. And because so many companies from a wide range of different backgrounds, whether you're talking about sports, entertainment, technology, are all looking to incorporate social impact across their brand. There's really a space for almost anyone with any type of background to really get engaged. But I think one thing I've been telling folks who've been interested in kind of entering the market is to, one, understand the communities that you are trying to engage. It is very easy to learn the skill of social impact, to like understand impact investment, to understand like how grants are written or how grants are given. That's the easy part. But if you don't understand the voices of the community, the needs of those communities, have a relationship with those communities, you can end up going into a space of power and do harm. So I just try to remind folks of like how important it is to ingrain yourself and understand what communities need. What are the things you need to unlearn, the biases that you've been taught, whether it was through your direct experience or something you learned on TV about said communities, and then really start to, I think, navigate where your skills can be best utilized in a team, a social impact team. So you can still do marketing and go and be a part of a social impact team. You can still be interested in a wide range. So just helping folks to realize that they don't need a cookie cutter background, but what they do need is a level of empathy and understanding and willingness to learn about a wide range of communities in order to show up and be helpful.
Thank you. Yes, yes.
Can I also add to that? 'Cause I
Yeah,
love
please
what you
do.
said. And another thing, for me, particularly as it relates to my identity as a Black woman, the other thing that I felt was important was not just putting my head down and working. Like I came into the space ready to just like, let me just do really good work and just like be quiet, not shake things up. But in reality, when it came to my career progression, the thing that took me the furthest was relationships within my company and people that did not do the functional same thing that I did, but them understanding me, where I came from, my story, where I want to go. That took me further. That like really boosted my career trajectory way more than what I had been taught throughout my life, which was just keep your head down and work. Like that is not actually the thing that for me set things off.
Yes, thank you. I see a panel, excuse me, I see a question in the chat that I'd like to lift up, and I'm going to invite you, Deidra, to comment first, and the other panelists if they're also interested. So what's your point of view on the future of CSR, and what are some tactical ways we can prepare ourselves to meet that moment? So I'm going to start with you, Deidra, see if you have any thoughts there.
I get the hard question, huh?
You get to share the hard question.
Yeah, I didn't bring my crystal ball. I do think that we're approaching a point where we're going to see I don't want to say regulations, but mandates put on corporations. I feel like we're nearing that place, right? As there's a lot of pushback, and in some cases, rightfully so, about greenwashing, about fuzzy numbers and what have you. If we're going to assign a value to these measurements, then there has to be some integrity and credibility associated with them too. And I just feel like we're nearing that place. I welcome it, honestly. There'll be some pain involved for sure, but I also think that for those of us in the organization, it puts a little more validity around what we're doing too. Yes, there are going to be some challenges and new hurdles to clear, but as one I said earlier, and I guess I'm sharing my Achilles heel a bit, that there are times when I think our work suffers from the misconception of being a nicety, a nice to have, you know, the cherry you put on or the window dressing, you know, you just show up and with the checks and make people smile. There's more to it than that. And I think there's a lot of juice left that we're not squeezing out of it. So that's honestly where I think we're headed. What we can do in the interim is, you know, make sure we're focusing on impact, making sure that we're applying without the mandate rigor to our work and our processes at all times. And I just wanted to circle back to the question you had asked about careers, because I think most times when people think about careers in CSR, they're thinking about the social part of it. What may be most visible, what may be best known, you know, Nike's painting parks and putting up swings and things like that. And there's value, of course, attached to that. But I think about CSR as all the behaviors of the corporation, right? So the way that we're behaving as a resident of the planet, right? Is there smoke coming out of our chimney? Are our cars clogging up the roads and putting out bad emissions? And I'm using, you know, saying those things figuratively. Are we exercising good judgment and fair practice as it relates to the people we do business with? So that might translate to some supplier diversity sorts of roles and supply chain sorts of roles, right? And on the other side, when we're talking about, you know, the figurative chimney, it might be fleet management, and it might be looking at, in our case, Trane Technologies manufactures, distributes, and services climate control technology. So that's your indoor HVAC for your building, your home, your school, and also the transport of food and medicine. So it means looking at what we're doing to make those refrigerants more sustainable, healthier for our environment. It means looking at one of the biggest contributors to climate change, which is food loss. And people don't necessarily realize that. And what can we do to mitigate food loss in the solutions we're using in the transport of foods? And then on the S side, it's things like D&I, right? Looking at our practices, our goals for attracting, developing, and supporting people of color to make sure that they have access to opportunity. It's all of those things. It's all of those things. So there are, you know, the opportunities are as broad as, you know, any corporate portfolio is. There are opportunities all along the organization.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, thanks for lifting that up. I think I saw Jamira, you had a hand up. Do you want to chime in?
Yeah, a part of me is like very optimistic, right? And another part of me is very pessimistic. I think the future of social impact, the future of corporate responsibility is going to be heavily under attack over the next year and leading into the future. And we're already seeing much of that chipping away with things like DEI. And I think also to Deidra's point, the level of accountability and transparency that is now going to be held to corporations, especially in regards to how they're tracking their successes, where their dollars are actually going, and creating some kind of consistency across the market. Because it's very easy for a company to say, we've impacted 150 million lives, but like, what does that really mean? Is that deep dive impact, or is that just one-off events, or you send a mailer? So in some countries are already requiring that level of transparency, and also requiring $1 to be attached for any company that operates within that country. So if that trend continues, I think we're going to see more of that potentially happen in the US, but we already know how things move a little slow. And the last thing I will say is because it's going to be impacted oftentimes by those who are leading the efforts to eliminate DEI, I think you're going to see a lot of corporations either stand fast in their commitments, or you're going to also see many of those commitments move away or disappear, as we've seen since the George Floyd killing in the last 12 months. So I think what we can do as a collective community is one, tell a better story about the impact of our work. Again, that it's not just a feel good thing, that it actually impacts the bottom line when you do things that are the benefit of the community, especially when corporations are oftentimes trying to solve a problem that they themselves created. And the last thing is, what are the ways in which we can collaborate outside of our organization with other folks who are leading in philanthropic ways to escalate that impact? So that's one thing I'm constantly conscious of, is looking for ways to collaborate with folks who are like-minded, but also who can help to tell a better story.
I love that. Tell a better story. And yeah, you're speaking our language, especially because we are, I'll just say that we are constantly and trying to figure out like what is our real impact besides just like the numbers. So what outcomes are we really going for? So at the end of the day, why is this a good thing? So yeah, I really resonate with that. I see Ola shaking her head too. So before we turn to Q&A, because I do want to give folks time to ask some questions, I want to ask go around and ask the panel one last set of questions about, can you tell me like what's the one thing that you're hoping that folks take away from this conversation before before we go into Q&A? Ola, do you have one?
Sure. I think the first thing that comes to mind is just hearing everyone's thoughts is, for anybody that is in the room interested in this space, is like you're definitely needed. I think going back off of that prior question around what we see for the future, I think long are the days for any performative actions for corporations. Just thinking about Gen Z and their kind of push to want to have companies, put their dollars where their mouth is and actually stand behind something. I think we need change makers in these rooms, in these spaces, to what Karmen mentioned earlier, to shake things up and to hold these companies accountable. So I hope that this conversation empowers you to look at your professional experience, of course, if you're hoping to be in this space, but also think about how your personal background and personal desires and passion actually does correlate to the work itself, and how you can position that to be in these type of roles and in these rooms, because again, it's very much needed. And as we continue to have more diverse thoughts and diverse backgrounds, that's when those type of real change for more long-term can be established.
Great, thank you. Jacqueline.
Yeah, the one thing I would probably want people to take away from this is that, yes, there's not a lot of us in this field. However, the unique thing about us is that corporate social responsibility work, environmentalists, it's in our blood, really. It truly is. And if you think about that, it comes natural to you. So be comfortable in your power. You have power, you have knowledge. So just to be responsible with that power, with that knowledge, and don't be afraid to use it. And the other thing is that I would beg people to read that book by Leah Thomas, The Intersectional Environmentalist. I read it on one flight from the East Coast to the West Coast, and it just opened my mind up so much about this field and how much power we have in this field and how this is nothing new for us. So that's my little two-piece from it.
Thank you. And how about you, Karmen?
Can I pass? Because I'm still thinking, actually.
Okay, yeah, absolutely you can. Jamira, well, actually, I'll go to Deidra and then I'll come back to you, Jamira. One thing you want folks to take away, the one thing.
There are frustrations in the work like anything else, and I'll go back to the other panelists have said so many brilliant things. I've taken notes, but I can't help but feel aligned to what Jamira said about, the disconnect at times. I've certainly been there, but I think I feel part of my responsibility in this work is to try to continue pushing toward better. Some days that is millimeters, some days we get a big gush at our backs and, we're able to move things further along. And sometimes it's very insidious sorts of things like mindset, right? Helping leaders to understand this isn't charity, this is investment, this is equity and opportunity work, right? And sometimes those are deeper and more intense conversations than you might expect. But understand that in this work, there is the opportunity if you're willing to be an agent of change.
Thank you. Yes. And Jamira, I'll let you.
Yeah, I'll take that last point, the agent of change. I've been doing social impact long before I ever entered a corporate space. And so I think if there's anything I would love for folks to understand is that you don't have to work for a big corporation to do social impact and to do corporate social impact. There are a lot of different avenues that intersect with that community, whether it's a small social impact firm, whether it's advocacy that you do in your community to a corporation, or consulting, or sitting on a local board. There are a ton of different ways for you to show up as your authentic self. And I think it's really about reflecting on where your skills are, what type of work environment you want to be in, but also a work environment that's going to make you successful without the noise, because there's going to always be noise and people always questioning your qualifications. And I think as someone who is entering, their soft life mindset, there's just types of noise that I don't want to participate anymore. So I think you can be the best version of yourself by ensuring that you're choosing the right type of environment you want to be in order to make the impact that you want to have.
Great, thank you. Great. So we're going to open it up for Q&A. I see one in the queue right now, and the question is, how would you describe the importance of return on impact? I always get the question from business people about ROI. So I'm guessing that's related to how do you put how do you assess impact for social good? And I'll open that up for anyone who, but Jacqueline, looks like you.
Yeah, we get this a lot. I work for an accounting firm, and they
Oh yeah, they want the crunchy, right?
They want the crunch, they want the numbers, they want the proof. And sometimes the biggest thing that works for us is when we're talking to them, we're talking about employee engagement. And when you can show them that when we get people involved and bring stuff to them that they really want to do, when we explore the passions of our people through our community impact programs, that does have a direct impact on the investments or the money on the bottom line. The other thing is that right now, what we see is a lot of our business units coming to us because the RFPs that come through, or the requests for proposals, are asking us those questions. How many hours are you all volunteering? What communities are you supporting? All of that shows up. And when you can bring that data and make sure you have good data or something insightful data, when you can bring that stuff back to them and as a piece of value to connect the dots for them, then it becomes easy for them to say, okay, I get it. I'm going to have my people. Okay, we're going to volunteer. Okay, we're going to focus on this initiative that you guys are doing. So
I also think it's important to note that just because something can be quantified does not mean its impact. And I think that's why it's important to tell a holistic story. As someone who's been working in education, you're oftentimes not going to see the results of education investment for at least a decade, right? And so how do you tell a holistic story about not just the communities that you engaged in, the products, the services that you have, but also the expectation of that impact long-term? And one thing that is consistent from when I worked in government to when I work in corporate is that leaders change so often and they need those quantitative things in order to justify their leadership. But giving, I think, also examples of what is it called? Case studies. So stories and backgrounds and like input that can add color and texture to the story oftentimes can tell a much better story than just saying 100 people, 1,000 people, 10,000 people attended this event or participated in this survey.
Great, I love both those perspectives. Thank you. Anyone else want to weigh in on that question before I move? Okay, let me see. So I'm looking at the chat. Any other questions? Let's see here. Mandy, you talked about strong community. Okay, so I think your question was answered, but Mandy, please, you can come off mute if your question about communications about your work and impact didn't get answered. All right. All right. Any other questions in the chat zone that you want to flag for me? Let's see, too many message. What type of volunteer events in the community have been most meaningful and inspiring to you all?
Well, I can speak to something that was very powerful to me. And things that I personally like to do is different from everybody else. But one thing that I really loved last year is it was our first Crow Cares Day where we shut the firm down from the US all the way over to our offices in India. And one thing that we do is that we try to explore the passions of our people. So we don't say you have to go and volunteer at the same place, really. And so when our people were able to say, okay, we're going to do this together as a team and go here, it was by office choice or by individual choice. But for me, I am very moved by supporting children, especially young girls in education. So anytime that I'm able to get in front of and mentor a young girl, those are the things that kind of sing to me personally. And I try to do that quite a bit wherever I can, whenever I can. So that's just something personal for me.
Thank you. Thank you
I
for
can
that.
chime in there too.
Yeah.
Thank you for the question, Ted, and for coming on camera so we can see you. Hello. It's similar to what Jacqueline was saying. That's where kind of the rubber meets the road, right? Is when you get up close and personal with members of the community. So we're a company that relies on technology and science in the course of our work. And so, you know, obviously we're trying to do things that are material for us that helps fill gaps. So we are trying to help Black and brown people to fall in love with STEM, and hopefully, you know, so much so that they'll study it and pursue a career in it. But it's a long journey, right? And so we try to close that gap by getting our people into classrooms in large number to provide lessons on sustainability, and not just sustainability in the abstract, but sustainability in a way that kind of matters to a young person. So we partnered with Discovery Education, created some custom modules along 8 topic areas, from decarbonization, green buildings, supply chain, food loss, all these sorts of things, and did it in a way that is youth specific. It's really for middle schoolers. And we have everything baked and ready to pull off the shelf for our volunteers. Everything from a letter that says, hello, my name is Deidra, I work here, I have these modules, can I set up a date? To the course outline, the slides you'll use, the take-home materials that they can bring home to their families to have dinner table conversations. And a couple of months ago, one of our chief accountants took time away during Investor Week, which is a hell week for her. And she came to my office and said, my colleagues think I'm crazy for taking a day right now to do this, but this is the best thing I did all year. She's like, there is just nothing like seeing the light come on in somebody's face when you show them something that they didn't know, and you help them believe something about themselves that they didn't know was possible. And I've had many of those moments myself, but it's really gratifying when other people bring those experiences back, because that's when you know you're building a real garden.
Great, thank you for that. Time for just one quick question. Jamira, this one was actually directed at you. You talked about the importance of understanding the communities that you're trying to serve. How does Apple do this? Yeah, how do you do this at Apple, and how how do you do it on a global level? What suggestions you'd have there?
Yeah, we love to say we move at the speed of trust. And so it requires us, it's very easy for us to scale, like to take an idea, to use our money, to use our point of view and scale it. But I think with our work, what makes it very unique is that we try to move at the speed of trust. So building relationships, having those community conversations, helping to understand the needs of those different communities, finding out where those communities overlap, helping them to understand the extent of which we as an organization have, what resources we have, what reach we have, and then finding ways for us to collaborate that are going to be mutually beneficial is really important for us, which I think is one of the things that I appreciate about working there is the ability to have very candid conversations with a wide range of stakeholders who are working on the front lines with the communities that we care about, and oftentimes have unique insights and that we would have never had if we didn't sit down and trust them to be the experts of their own experience.
Yes, thank you. All right. Well, we are coming close to our time, so I am going to just do a quick round of kind of what some of the high themes were of our conversation, and certainly invite my panelists to chime in as well. But I heard a lot about how this role requires folks to show up as change agents, and not just your everyday change agent, but courageous change agents, so that you can be sure that you are moving in this space in an authentic way, for yourself, but also for the communities that you're seeking to serve. So just want to lift that out and put it out into the universe. And then I love, there was a quote, I think it might have been you, Deidra, who said this, it's equity, this is equity and opportunity work, which we all know is so important, not just in this time, but for all time. So want to plant that seed with everyone. And then the whole conversation about really telling a better story so that we get folks to see that this is not just the nice to have work going on in companies, but it's a must have, and that there's a mutually beneficial relationship between what you are trying to do as a company, business wise, as well as how you show up in society and support the communities where you're working and doing business. So that's how I would sum it up. I would just once again invite my panelists, if there's one other, if there's a theme that you think is, super important to lift up that I haven't shared, please chime in. All right. Well, with that, I want to thank our panel. I think I mentioned at the top of the hour that we had a group of phenomenal Black women here that we would learn from about how they lead and how they're making an impact. And I think, I know I feel like I have learned. And so I hope that everyone on the call has at least taken away one nugget that will be useful for them in any context. And with that, I'd like to toss it back to you, Summer.
Thank you, Paula. This conversation has been so filling. My brain is about to explode because it's just so much brilliance on the call. So I just want to acknowledge your pearls. Thank you for sharing them with me. Deidra, Karmen, Jamira, Ola, Jacqueline, and Paula, thank you for just making this conversation come alive and weaving in those stories. Some of the things that I plan to take away is being a ferocious learner, and being nimble in your approach. Exploring the passion of our people. That's one of the quotes that I put down. I thought that was really important. Finding your tribe and networking. I mean, just being in this space and being able to bring people together is really important, to find your tribe of people and have those people to help you on those hard days when you're not sure what's going on. And the opportunity to be a change agent if you're willing to show up. The importance of integrity to your communities and just realizing your power and perspective and bringing those in the spaces. Like, that's really, really important when, sometimes you're not getting the support you may need to support those communities. So again, Thank you to the panelists. I want to thank Zoe. She is the magician behind the curtain who has been pulling all the strings. So Zoe, I do want to acknowledge all of the work that you've done in getting us here. I want to thank the board, my board members, Paula, Byron, I think Rakibo's on the line, James, and the ones that are not here, and our members. It's so good to see you, Ted, Maisha. Let's see. I think it was Deborah in the crowd, and if I did not say your name, thank you.